Crime Page podcast featuring Scott Williams Collins.
Hello and welcome to the True Crime Page podcast. I'm your host Scott Williams Collier. Today guys, we're going to cover another unsolved murder case from the UK, and that is the murder of 17-year-old post office worker Brenda Evans from a small settlement of Poulton in Cheshire. Now, Brenda was said to be a nice young girl who was reserved and quiet. In 1979, she did recently become engaged to her boyfriend, 20-year-old John Pritchard, who worked as a farm labourer in the area. John was also said to be quiet, and the couple were well matched. They got engaged in the summer of 1977 and celebrated their engagement with 80 friends and family members at the Rosette British Legion, where Brenda's parents were members. Brenda had also recently found employment as a shop assistant at the Pulford Village Post Office. She was said to really enjoy her job, and her boss, Pulford Village Postmaster Sam Roberts, said that she showed promise in her role and she had good timekeeping. Friday, the 7th of October in 1979 was a normal day to begin with for Brenda. She went to work at her job at the post office. Her boss, Samuel Roberts, said she carried out her normal Friday morning duties, left for lunch saying, "Bye-bye, see you later." This was the last time, unfortunately, that he would see Brenda alive again. That dinner time, Brenda, as she often did, went to visit her auntie and uncle who lived at the nearby Springfield cottages about half a mile away. Brenda's uncle, Selwyn Davis, said nothing unusual happened during Brenda's lunch hour, which she always spent with him and his wife on Fridays. His wife, Mrs. Violet Davis, added Brenda was dressed in her usual type of clothes, had seemed the same as usual, and left to return to work at the normal time. She said, "From an upstairs window, I saw her go out the front gate. She turned and waved at me, and that was the last time I saw her again." Brenda left her auntie and uncle's house around 1:50 p.m. and was last seen by a local lady, Mrs. M. McNaught, walking towards the Pulford Post Office on Old Lane. The same resident subsequently saw a dark blue or green Mark II type Cortina car driving past her down Old Lane towards Brenda as she approached the back lane junction near the Wrexham Chester Road. Mrs. McNaught, who drove past Brenda and the mysterious car that day, said Brenda was about 300 yards away from the post office when she saw her. If the blue or green car drove down Old Lane, then the driver, who was a man, must have seen Brenda about 20 seconds later and would have possibly been the last person, apart from the killer, to see her alive. Brenda never arrived back at work that day. Postmaster Samuel Roberts was surprised she did not return at the usual time. When Brenda's mum called into the shop that afternoon, she became very concerned when she'd learned Brenda had never returned to work. A search was soon underway, and friends and neighbours began to search along the route she would have normally taken. Mrs. Edith Pritchard of Chapel Cottage, Poulton, mother of Brenda's fiancé, John, described how she found Brenda's body by an old hut near the Pulford approach. She went out and searched for Brenda after Brenda's mother had told the family she was missing. Mrs. Pritchard said, "I thought if somebody had picked her up, she might have been dumped. I knew the area because I used to go blackberry picking there. After looking in the hut, Mrs. Pritchard noticed the manhole and thought she could see something inside it. She said, I leaned over and looked right down and I could see something blue. I thought it might be a sleeve. I went on my knees and put my head inside the hole and could see Brenda's face. Then I picked myself up and ran home. He fetched a neighbour to help, but by this time it was getting dark. He thought at first it was rags in the manhole, but after striking a match he said they should call the police. Mrs. Pritchard went on to say, as we left, I noticed Brenda's panties on the ground. I picked them up and put them in my overall pocket. On both occasions, I looked into the manhole. I was sure that Brenda was already dead. After discovering Brenda's body, a massive police investigation was launched, led by Chief Superintendent Gerald Williams, head of Cheshire CID, and Detective Superintendent Roy Suckley. Everyone in the local area was interviewed, but no arrests were ever made. Brenda's fiancé, John Pritchard, was kept in for routine questioning, but was released without any charge being made. At the time, Mr. Pritchard's solicitor, Mr. Dennis Diamond, representing John and his mother, stressed that his clients did not feel they needed his protection. He said, they are thoroughly decent people who are caught up with processes with which they are unfamiliar. I came along as a comforter, not a shield. Full post-mortem results were not revealed to the public, but the police did say that Brenda had been beaten around the head and had been strangled with her own tights. The police also said they believe Brenda was not murdered at the location where her body was found. There were no signs of a struggle there. The police also revealed that the killer, who had carried Brenda at least 100 yards into the wooded area to dump her body down the manhole, had tried to make her murder look like a suicide by cutting her with a knife. This, however, was found to be done after death. Although the murder of Brenda and the behaviour of the killer pointed towards someone possibly being local, with local knowledge, the police were not convinced the predator was local. The evidence concerning the car seen by the witness, Mrs. McNaught, threw that theory into the air. Police appealed for the driver of that car to come forward, but were never able to trace its owner. They also said that the vehicle did not belong to anyone local. Now, the fact that the driver never came forward could suggest this was a traveller passing through who was totally unaware of Brenda's murder, or was it someone who refused to come forward because they had some involvement in Brenda's murder? It was also revealed by the police that a similar looking car, a green DAF car, was seen turning hurriedly onto the Wrexham Chester Road off Old Lane at 3:45 p.m. the same afternoon that Brenda was murdered, which had also not been traced. Is it possible that these two cars were in fact the same car? After a reconstruction of Brenda's last walk to work on that fateful day and a painstaking police investigation, thorough search of the deposition site and all the local people interviewed, as well as door-to-door inquiries in the neighbouring areas, police were unfortunately unable to find a suspect, and the case soon went cold. Brenda's parents were so upset by the fact that Brenda's body was dumped in the water-filled manhole just a few hundred yards away from where she lived with them at Yew Tree Cottage, they decided to leave their home and move into a council house at the nearby council estate in Rossett. Serial rapist and murderer David John Evans from Betsfield in Clyde, who was sentenced to 30 years in prison for the murder of 15-year-old Hannah Humphreys in 1989, has been questioned twice about the murder of Brenda Evans, but no charges were ever brought against the convicted killer. Cheshire Police, reviewing Brenda's murder in 2013, were hoping that a review of the case would reveal some vital forensic evidence that could help trace the killer. Cheshire Police spokeswoman at the time, Shelley Williams, said all unsolved homicides cases were subject to periodic review. She added, "You'll appreciate the technology and forensic capabilities have moved on since her murder in 1977. At this moment in time, we are conducting a forensic review of the evidence in the case. There have been no developments of significance in any other line of investigation at the present." Sadly, no charges have been brought against anyone, and Brenda's case still remains unsolved in over 45 years. My personal thoughts on this case, obviously it's a real mystery. These cases are that remain unsolved for decades. The behaviour of the killer and the area where he dumped Brenda's body would suggest that this was someone local with local knowledge. But then we have the sighting of the dark blue or green coloured Mark II Cortina type car driving towards Brenda when she was only apparently 300 yards away from where she worked. Just under 2 hours later, a similar looking car, a green DAF car, was seen driving away quickly from the area. Is it possible that these two vehicles were actually the same car? It's quite easy to misidentify a car, especially if you're not a car enthusiast. It could quite possibly be in the same car. It also raises suspicions that the owner of the vehicle never came forward to eliminate himself from the investigation. If the car driver was involved in Brenda's murder, it's unlikely she got in the car willingly. Brenda was a quiet and respectable girl who would never accept a lift from anyone, even from someone she knew. This was partly due to the warnings of her father. Mr. Harry Evans had said his eldest daughter had been picked up in a car 4 years ago, prior to Brenda's murder, but fortunately she escaped unharmed. Since then, their father had emphasised to both his daughters they should not accept lifts from anyone. Now, this is just my opinion, so I'm not passing it off as fact, but I do feel, in my opinion, that this mystery vehicle does have something to do with Brenda Evans' murder. I think if there's anyone out there who's listening to this podcast today, if you recall anyone who had a dark blue or a green Mark II type Cortina vehicle around that time and had any connections to the Poulton area or any of the neighbouring towns, it would be a good idea to pass that information on to the police. The only way we're going to find any closure with Brenda's case, I feel, is if somebody comes forward with some vital information. The only other chance of solving this case really is if the police have any success in retrieving a DNA sample from the evidence they've got. I did actually reach out to Cheshire Police. I did a Freedom of Information request a while ago to ask if they could confirm whether they'd found any DNA. And unfortunately, as happens with these cold cases, sometimes some of the police forces are unwilling to disclose any information like that. So I was unable to ascertain whether any DNA had been retrieved. That's the end of the podcast today. It's just a quick one. This is one of my passions, is raising awareness for cold cases like Brenda's. I really do think it's very important. If you keep it out there in the public domain, we keep sharing information, it could potentially give someone the confidence to come forward and say something to the police that they may have held back all those years ago. Sometimes people do things out of loyalty or out of fear. And obviously relationships and friendships and people change over the passage of time. So I do think it's really important. It could also help someone recollect something who may have been there that day, and they remember something that could potentially be vital, and they could pass that on to the police. So do me a favour, everyone. Like the video, subscribe to the channel and ring the bell. Doesn't cost you anything. It helps with the algorithm, brings more people to the channel, and you're doing a good thing as well. If you share the video, you're helping raise awareness, and who knows, something good hopefully comes of it. Right, that's it for the podcast today, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. It's my first one for quite a while. I've not put any content on my channel for a while because I've been busy. But I am going to be putting regular content on going forward. I'm going to mainly concentrate on unsolved cases. I am going to revisit some of the cold cases that I've done previously, especially the Vera Anderson case. some of you may be unaware, I run the Justice for Veronica Facebook group on Facebook, which has had a good response. We've got over 1,800 people in that group now. Many of them are local to Warrington and Widnes who remember the crime. So yeah, if you're interested in that and you want to help share information and raise awareness, by all means you can join that. I'll put the link for it in the information at the bottom of the YouTube video. And that's it. I'll be back soon. Be good to one another, and until next time, I'll see you soon.